This is how deep our sin goes, is that now the whole of the core of the man has been affected. It did not destroy the will of man. When Adam and Eve sinned against God, it did not destroy the will of man. Reformation theology was very key in reminding us of earlier teaching given by Augustine in the early church, and then that teaching was derived from Paul's teaching himself, and even what had been given to us in the fullness of Scripture. The will of man was not completely destroyed. No, man still had a will. The problem was the will was now corrupted. It was corrupted in fullness. It's not that you and I don't make choices. It's not that you and I don't have a will anymore. It's not that we're not actual beings who function choosing things. It's that our will is actually corrupted now. And the corruption has gone to the very base core value of who we are as human beings. This is why David said, "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me." He's not talking about the activity by which he was conceived. He's talking about the fact that him being conceived as a person now meant that he would be born in sin, a sin nature, a will that was corrupted. In the garden, we had a will to freely choose to obey God. After the fall, we have a will. It's not destroyed, but we have a will that is corrupted, and our base value or base foundation for choosing anything now is founded in a fallen, sinful nature. Yes?
I think that's the easier thing to accept in this scheme, that we all admit we have a sinful nature. I think the harder thing to accept is we're guilty of Adam's sin, because that's original sin. You'll have Arminians say we have a fallen nature to a degree, but accepting the guilt of Adam's sin in the garden, that's where you get the whole, this is unfair, I wasn't there argument.
Well, and the reality is, even if we want to say it's unfair, the problem is, how else did you get a sin nature?
Right.
Have you only gotten a sin nature after a few years of living on the earth and somehow it just happened? Have every one of you from birth at some point been confronted with a tree in the garden moment? And if that's the case, then you didn't do any better. But that's not the teaching of Scripture. The teaching of Scripture is, what Scripture is showing you is that because Adam did sin and he was a chosen representative. And this gets into the doctrine of election a little bit later. But you have to recognize God ordained who the chosen representative would be. And if you're at odds with God choosing the chosen representative, then you're going to be at odds with God choosing the chosen representative for salvation.